There's a really disturbing video from just a couple of days ago of law enforcement that is aggressing protesters. But in this instance, it's not actually ICE or Customs and Border Patrol. But I want to share it with you because I think that there are a couple of good lessons from this video. In particular, the way that the person who's documenting is behaving and the words that we're hearing, the communication that we're hearing from protesters who are witnessing what is happening.
Shame! 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 Shame!
They were just pushing back the National Lawyers Guild observers. That was where we saw that altercation just there that led up to what you're seeing right here. It was a National Lawyer Guild observer. They've been out here at these protests repeatedly just to take note on what happens. They're observers much in the same way as the press.
Be observers, and your fucking cop just hit them in the head.
Okay, I know that was difficult to watch, and what was happening there was pretty confusing. That video was from Book Club Chicago. That's in Broadview, I believe. Understanding is that that is the sheriff. That's not ICE agents in this instance. And it's unfortunate that we are seeing Illinois State Police, local police forces, not unlike how we're seeing Portland police, who are not defending American citizens, but seem to be part of the problem. In particular here, what is happening is you see that there is a member of the sheriff's who is extremely escalated, unable to control himself, lacks self-discipline. Now we know that ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, they have no training, they have no capability, no desire to de-escalate a situation, but legitimate law enforcement is supposed to be trained in de-escalation. They're supposed to be bringing the temperature down. They're supposed to be protecting your right to peacefully protest and figuring out how to disperse a crowd or how to manage a situation without escalating it into a riot, into a situation where civilians are being brutalized by police. How that works out in reality, though, yeah. But you can see the majority of law enforcement there, whether or not they should have been pushing that crowd back, they're clearly not instigating violence. But there's one sheriff who's incredibly emotionally dysregulated. I don't know who that dude was and what his badge number is, but he should not have fucking been in that situation. One of his buddies should have tapped himself out. One of his buddies should have tapped him out. The person that he ended up shoving in that video was a legal observer from the National Lawyers Guild. Putting your hands on a legal observer, that is akin to putting your hands on the press. They have the same kinds of protections. They should be afforded the same kinds of protections. Legal observers are there in an impartial role to document what is happening, and what they record and what they write down can be used as evidence in a court of law. Cops are not supposed to fuck with legal observers. Now in 2020 in Portland, we saw the cops did that, more than once. So it's not like that's unheard of. It should be unheard of. It is unconscionable for members of law enforcement in the United States to put their hands on members of the press and on legal observers. But what I want to point to here is not so much the member of law enforcement who cannot control himself and is so unable to exercise emotion regulation that he is like low-key gonna prioritize his own emotional distress over the rights of an American. But it's really far more how the protesters respond. First of all, like I made a video a couple days ago where I was talking about how it's helpful to articulate what your rights are in the moment, because cops either don't know your rights or they're allowed to lie to you. They will try and break the law, but more like they're not actually legal experts. And so they will try and do things that aren't necessarily legal because they don't know better. And if you can speak in an authoritative mom voice and tell them like, that's not illegal, you can't touch her like that, you're breaking the law, that's illegal, like just really clearly articulate You shoved her. You can't shove her. She's a legal observer. You can't touch her. I think you might be surprised how many times cops are going to hesitate on doing the violent and illegal thing because they're like, oh shit. They start to question themselves like, am I about to do something for which I could get in trouble? Remember, qualified immunity doesn't mean that you can violate people's rights. So that's the first thing. People were clearly articulating what was happening as they were documenting it. They were describing it. They were saying in real time, like, you can't do that. You're doing this thing to a legal observer, and that's not acceptable. Then they were also calling on other members of law enforcement, like, hey, come get your boy, right? So we did see, this is to the credit of the other members of law enforcement. I know you're like, Angela, you're giving credit to law enforcement, but I am in this instance. They like kept that guy from charging that legal observer, right? And then from charging at other protesters. They constrained him. They realized that situation was about to get out of control. That member of law enforcement was about to escalate. And they did get in the way and they stopped. And it did seem like they were listening to protesters who were trying to explain, like, this is not fucking okay. What are you doing? I think we have to remember members of law enforcement are Americans too. And a lot of them feel very used. A lot of them realize they're in a very high stress situation. They don't like what's happening right now. Nobody's loving this, y'all. Nobody's enjoying this except maybe a couple of sociopaths working for ICE. This is a very high stress situation and nobody in legitimate law enforcement wants to be incendiary, I don't think. America is a powder keg. Donald Trump has turned us into a powder keg because he really wants an explosion. He wants a civil war so bad. He's desperate to get a civil war. And so it's really good for us to remind members of law enforcement, like, this isn't okay. This is illegal. We are your neighbors. We are your neighbors, right? Like, I go to church with you. My kid goes to school with you. What you're doing is not okay, right? Like my granny plays bridge with your granny. I live in your neighborhood. We shop at the same grocery store. We are Americans. Why are we letting the regime do this to us? I think it's really, really good right now for us to remember the humanity of law enforcement and to remember our own humanity. It is always a winning move to remind law enforcement that we are real people, that we have a connection to each other. The more you can humanize a situation, the harder it is for somebody to enact violence against you. The easier it is for them to dehumanize you, the easier it is for them to brutalize you. So you've got to speak out loud, remind yourself, other protesters, law enforcement of what the law is. When you see law enforcement doing something illegal, you clearly articulate, you can't do this, this is illegal, this is what the law is. And then also you remind everybody there that we are all human beings. I know it's tempting to want to treat law enforcement like they're just a bunch of pigs, right? I know it's tempting to want to dehumanize them, especially when they are upholding the will of the regime, when you feel like they're trampling on your rights, when you feel like they're being a pillar of support under the regime. Our job is not to alienate the pillars of support. Our job is to chip away at their support for the regime so that in the moment they will be non-compliant with illegal orders, so that in the moment they will choose the people over Donald Trump, so that they will choose democracy over fascism, so that their loyalty will lie with their humanity, with their neighbors, right? Rather than being willing to sacrifice their own humanity, sacrifice their future and the future of this nation to Donald Trump. So think about that. Think about the strategies for that. I know I talk about the Otpor movement a lot, but that's because they were a nonviolent liberation movement in Serbia, primarily nonviolent. That's because they spent a lot of time reaching out to, witnessing, for lack of a better word, to law enforcement and members of the military, so that when the time came where it was crucially important, where Slobodan Milosevic was like, fire on civilians, members of law enforcement were like, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do this for you. We're not going to kill our neighbors. We're not going to kill our uncles. We're not going to kill our son's best friend for you. And I think we've got to remember that strategy. It's incredibly effective. So I thought here in this instance, everything that the documentarians and other protesters did was absolutely correct. No, it wasn't okay that a legal observer was treated in this way by law enforcement. No, it was not okay at all. But there's a lot to learn from this video. Really, really proud of the folks in Illinois and the work that they're doing to defend immigrants, to defend democracy, to defend the future of this nation. Illinois, Oregon is with you, and we commend your courage. We commend your willingness to stand up. Thank you for doing the right thing in this moment, in this video, and also on a daily basis. On behalf of immigrants and on behalf of this country, thank you.